How thrilled I am, especially to be here with Clark and Wiley and Charles. It's like a homecoming for me. I grew up I was born and raised in Washington State, but I've lived all over the country. I lived in Connecticut, I lived in Rhode Island. But for me, probably the biggest thing that happened to me in my life was I came down for graduate school, I think in 2002, and Louisiana, and ever since then, I've always felt like it was an accident of birth that I was raised, that I grew up someplace else. Because Louisiana is just one of those places that I just seemed to fit here. And I remember one of my first memories of being here. I hadn't been here for more than a week, and I just moved into my studio at LSU, and I went to the school because you could go there 24-hour access. And I walked into the old engineering. I don't know if you've been there, but it looks like a big torture chamber. A great big hallway, and it's 1 o'clock at night, and the fluorescents are flickering. And I walk into the hallway, and about halfway down the hallway, there's a giant heron about this big, walking along picking roaches off the wall. And I was just like, wow, this is awesome, you know? And in fact, you know, so much of this around here, it's so familiar. In fact, the frogs on that piece there, I think one of them, Clark, that I made a mold off, that was the night Clark and I were down right here in the golf course in the ditch with a flashlight catching bullfrogs. Anyway, I was raised up, my father was a taxidermist, and he worked for a guy who owned the taxidermy shop that later became my stepfather. So when you look at my work, it's a lot of it is about making molds of things from nature. In fact, almost everything is from nature, or combined with things that I've sculpted. And I don't like people to know what I've sculpted and what I haven't. I like things to be sort of seamless. And I also like this. You know, everybody always asks me, how come I don't do art with taxidermy? But there's no novelty in that for me because I grew up with it. But what I love is kind of this, it's interesting to me that I'm wearing a leather belt, and a lot of you have maybe leather shoes, and that doesn't bother you at all. But then if I had an armadillo perched on my shoulder, it would be a little disturbing, or a snake wrapped around my, you know. So things like that. But again, back to Louisiana, that's one thing, in fact, just the other night in conversation, we were trying to pin it down. Hunter Roth was born here, but he's now up in Oklahoma, and he was down here for the reception. And we were talking about the difference. And I think too often people will say, oh, the difference is the swamp, or the difference is this, or whatever. But I think one thing that I love about Louisiana, and one reason why I like making work here and I like using things about Louisiana, is because the people are very accepting. As Hunter put it, they're not in your business. And there's more of an open-mindedness towards people, and sort of a celebration of just individuality that's really, really different. I can't tell you how often when I was in grad school, somebody come to my studio and go, God damn, that's weird. I gotta have it. I gotta take it home. So anyway, and I guess the other thing I would say about my work, I mean, I don't have a lot to say that I haven't said already in my artist statement or whatever, and I would actually love questions. But the other thing I would say is that I'm pretty lucky in that I'm not an artist that has to make his living off of my art. I mean, I love selling art, but I love to play more than anything, and that's one reason why. One reason why I admire these guys, because they are the opposite. They're like full-time artists. And I could lie and say, oh, I would love to be that. But I actually had my own business for like 10 years, and it sucks, sitting in your studio all day. I like being around young people. I like being around people that have new ideas, and they're excited, enthusiastic. And so I'm lucky to teach at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock right now. And every day is kind of a different, you know, in fact, when I go back, the first thing I'm going to do is set up some projects and start making stuff. And I just wanted to point this out because I don't think anybody's heard it because they don't know that it's on, but I went through this kick where I make guitars. Do I know how to play guitars? No, I do not. But so a lot of my work is about play too. In fact, this is kind of a lie here. I mean, I focused on this show trying to get everything done, but if you're at my studio at home, there's lots of really bad attempts at art. Anyway, what else? Do people, oh, I need to walk over here? Actually,
You don't need to say it, but
I heard that Jason likes it when you stare at the wall. Here's my work over here. Who has a question? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Can you play Freebird?
I can't play anything. Yeah, and then I married a musician. I'm like making these guitars, and she's like, that doesn't have frets. That doesn't have like what I need to make a guitar, you know. And so she belittles me. But what can you do? But luckily, actually, we went up to Fayetteville, this music thing, and this kind of old-time jazz musician. How would you describe him? Just played a lot of blues. He sat down with it and started playing, and I'm not kidding you, I teared up because it was just like, I don't know how to play it. and this is the first one. I actually made a bunch of them that sound awful. This is the first one. If you get into guitars, that you can get on these websites and buy magnetic pickups. You can make a guitar out of anything. It's a lot of fun. Anyway, more questions? I hope so. It's really embarrassing when there's no questions. I already know you.
Since you're the first one to speak, can you tell us the Mississippi River School?
Well, that would be a better one for Clark, but I would say basically that and one thing that was neat about being at the cocktail party last night is actually all the people in your house, for the most part, are kind of what Clark, I think, was envisioning with that title. I look at it as more like all the people that were there at the same time, you know, even though I was in grad school, and I sort of took it for granted when we were here, but one thing I loved about Baton Rouge at that time, it's cheap to live, the weather's always nice, which you take for granted, but I lived in Montana. Before I got the job in Arkansas, I lived in Montana for 5 years. It's like The Shining up there, you know? You're inside and it's freezing, and my studio was in the basement, and a lot of times I couldn't work because it would just freeze. My water was frozen, my clay was frozen. And there's something about, there was a time there where I lived in this little apartment and I had a garage studio, and Clark's studio was right next to mine, and a friend, Bryce Briscoe, was right next to, and there was a lot of drinking that happened at that time, you know. But Hunter was there, Charles, I mean, everybody was there working. At any time of the night, you could probably go find somebody to go hang out with, you know. And so that's, I think that's what you were thinking about when you came up with that. But plus it sounds cool. Yeah, but it's better than 4 people that know each other. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, how do you make the molds from the animals?
That's a good question. It's actually really, really easy. And this one
I assume they're dead.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if anyone saw this here or was wondering about what this is there, but that's actually the upper palate of a wild boar. We were at a ranch in Texas, and they just shoot these things and leave them lay. And so we went out and they got one, and he thought I was crazy, but I gutted it out and threw it on top of the car, and we took it home. And it was hanging up in the garage, cooling. And I looked at the mouth and I thought, that's really cool. And I just take a slab of clay and pressed it right up in there. And when I started doing it, it was before I went to LSU, but I kind of thought that I'd invented it, just pressing clay into things. And then I told the professor that, and he says, yeah, you did, along with the Egyptians, Greeks, the Romans. But it's kind of cool because it's if you look at contemporary mold making, it's all plaster or injected plastics or lost wax or whatever. And no one ever really talks about a lot of these ancient techniques that people use. It's the easiest thing in the world. You just press clay, the soft clay.
And then it hardens. And
then you pull it off, and it hardens. And I like to bisque fire it so that it's more durable. And then that bisque is naturally absorbent, and you can press the clay into it. In fact, almost for that food face portrait in there, almost all the vegetables on that were the molds were made with clay molds. I went to the salad bar at school. And pressed clay into it, and then it was really fun because I got these hairnets, and we wore hairnets, but the students wouldn't wear them because they're lame. Pressed hairnets. And so some things I use plaster molds like this. The rooster head, a lot of it was re-sculpted too, but that was a mold I had to do in plaster. But the zipper, that was just pressing clay onto.
And then you use your molds over and over again.
Yeah, and this is
different
this is
ways.
totally a shameless self-plug, but I'm working on a mold making book right now. Should be out soon.
$9.99?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who else has a question? Yes, yes, sir.
This is kind of a loaded question because I know the answer, but I bet a lot of people don't realize that. I thought that was glass, but
Yeah.
you tell me that's a
That's porcelain. And when I was at LSU, I was working with translucent porcelain in the early 90s, but I didn't really have any success with it because back then we didn't have those really neat fluorescent bulbs, you know, that were cool. We had a conventional bulb, so if I made something, in fact, Renee, you had a little cylinder in there. I used to make those in the early 90s, and they would almost all crack because the bulb was too hot.
We had to get a night light.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a good thing you didn't burn your house down. But so these are just a fluorescent bulb, you know, and this porcelain is actually about half glass. It's about 50% English grog and the other 50% flux and silica. So, and I'm happy to share it with anybody. Anybody who works with ceramics, I took a recipe that someone in the Val Cushing, if you know ceramics, you know Val Cushing, but his recipe, and I changed it, and so now it's mine. But anybody else? No? Yes.
I wanted to know more about the snake.
The snake? Well, these are, I call this series Poison Flowers, and also the snakes. And it's funny because I always say that I don't go to church or whatever, but it's funny, the religion question, I'm pretty dodgy with it, you know. And especially in the art world now, it's really uncool to admit that you believe anything, you know. But it really is. You get around people and you're like, oh, I'm religious, and then they're like, ooh, you know. And my wife's a heathen too, so I can't even talk to her about it. But a lot of these things are about, are sort of like the Garden of Eden and that snake temptation. I love that, and I just love it. It's great. You know, there's nothing better than a little poisonous snake to just sort of electrify something, you know.
Where'd you get it?
The Atchafalaya Basin, right there. Most of the, I try not to, this is true, this is not a lie, I try not to kill things anymore. Because it's wrong.
Just for art, but for food.
Yeah. But the snakes, you can usually find them on the road. I mean, it's funny, if you're in a lot of things, like the armadillo, there's armadillo print in a lot of the stuff. Well, the garfish I caught in Atchafalaya Basin, the alligator, I actually, funny story, way before my wife, who I love very much, I was actually going down to New Orleans with this girl that I didn't know very well. We were going to go down and have some fun, and I saw a truck hit this alligator on the road. And I pulled over, and she didn't see it, and I pulled over and I said, hypothetical question. I'm not passing that thing up. She was cool with it, you know? So, yeah, but a lot of stuff I try not to, you know, there's plenty of stuff to find around. You don't have to, you know. But the snake was, that was in the Atchafalaya Basin, that was just found on the road.
Do you take requests for animals?
Take requests?
I mean, like, if you wanted, like, say I wanted you to do a nutria.
A nutria? Well, they're hard to make molds of because they're so furry.
They're
Yeah. And the nutria, but then maybe parts of like the feet are, really interesting, you know. I don't really do, that's a nice thing about not having to make your living off it is I don't have to do, you know, people are like, oh, can you do this custom order? I'm like, no.